I first learned about Tanner Bishop while playing in a youth basketball league. He went to a different high school than I did. Our teams met at the boys' club on Saturdays. He was one of those kids who grew up early, and he was 5 or 6 inches taller than the rest of us. Upon reflection, I decided that my team did pretty well against Tanner's team. The talent gap was obvious. I also noticed that once Tanner's team took the lead, he started goofing around, showing off, passing from behind, throwing three-pointers, etc. We came back, and while the end result was never in doubt, we made it a little more competitive than it really should have been. We ended up at the same high school and both played football our freshman year. That's when I officially met Tanner. As I suspected, Tanner was big, athletic, and popular on the football field. Naturally, he was the quarterback. I, on the other hand, tried out at the running back position. Our coach used a two-guard system. We had a guy on our team named Nat Whitfield, who was the fastest at the one running back position. I was the second fastest. I wasn't as fast as Nat, but I blocked well, protected Tanner when he passed, was a decent runner, and could catch a pass coming out of the backfield. Where Tanner was bright, I was steady. On defense, Tanner was an average halfback, and I played fullback. There were many times while playing defense that he would try to make a spectacular save, and I would have to cover him from the fullback position. We were pretty good, and I started to bond with a group of players. Of course, the center of that group was Tanner. They say opposites attract, and although Tanner and I had a lot in common, personality-wise, we were almost opposites. He was a loud, popular, outgoing guy. I, on the other hand, was a bit of an introvert, staid, and certainly not flamboyant. But somehow we became good friends. Tanner was smart, but he didn't always pay attention. More than once, I shared my notes with him or did some last-minute tutoring to help him with an upcoming test. Usually, the reason he wasn't paying attention in class was some girl. The payback for helping me study was my social presence in Tanner's solar system. After class, at lunch, at school dances, there was always a crowd of girls and boys gathered around Tanner. I was crowded into that social circle. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a nerd, but compared to Tanner, we all looked a little pale. Through this socializing, I became a member of the popular crowd. For the first few years of high school, none of us had a girlfriend. We did all the social stuff that happens in high school, but there were no permanent companions. That all changed in junior high. Out of the blue, and I'm still not sure how it started, Tanner had a girlfriend, Anne-Marie Dubois, and attended St. Cecilia's Catholic school on the other side of town. The fact that she attended a Catholic school rather than our school gave her a certain local exoticism. Her appearance contributed to that exoticism. Anna was of average height, about 5 feet 7 inches. She had dark, almost black hair. She had olive skin and an attractive heart-shaped face, slightly almond-shaped eyes, and full lips. Very pretty, but it was her body that impressed me. Slender, with a thin waist and an athletic, strong physique. The homecoming dance was coming up, and Tanner obviously had a crush on the beautiful Anna. I didn't have a date. One day, a week or so before the dance, Tanner and I were sitting in the cafeteria. "Max, do you have a date for next week's dance?" Tanner asked me. I sensed he was up to something. Although I considered him a close friend, perhaps my best friend, his interest in my well-being was rarely expressed out loud. It was a little unusual that he inquired about my status for the dance. "No, nothing yet," I told him. We had a lot of great girls we went to school with, but none of them stood out to me. "In that case, Anna has a friend, Mia. She's really nice and isn't dating anyone right now," said Tanner to me. "Tanner, I don't know her. I've never met her." "She doesn't know me," I told him. "But what does she look like?" I asked. I guess I was curious. It turned out that Mia Battle was also a junior at St. Cecilia's S. Whereas Anna was athletically built and taller, Mia was petite. Where Anna was a gorgeous little girl, Mia would most likely be considered cute. Small, slim, and cute. We first met at McDonald's. Tanner and I came together. Mia came with Anna. I guess physically I passed some kind of test with Mia, and she certainly did too. The following Saturday, we went to the senior prom in the company of Tanner and Anna. That evening after the dance, I told Mia that I had a good time. She replied that she had too. I liked her. She was fun and funny, and the fact that she went to a different school gave her a certain mystique about our school. I found out through Tanner that she liked me too. We started dating. There was a Christmas ball at St. Cecilia's school. I guess since it was a religious school, they were allowed to not say Christmas. In our politically correct high school, any December performances had to be called winter. Nevertheless, it was a big deal at St. Cecilia's school, and Tanner and I were asked to go to the dance. The dance was not in some crappy school gym, but in the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel downtown. We entered the ballroom, Tanner, Anna, Mia, and I was not prepared for the hostility from the men attending St. Cecilia's S. We were treated as if we were a raid of marauders from another village intent on stealing their women. Several remarks were made to us as we passed by, and I didn't see a single friendly male face. I was dancing with Mia, and this guy, dark-haired and stocky, interfered with my dance. I politely gave Mia a place in the dance. After 2 dances, she joined me at our table. Later, we were dancing again, and the same guy tried to interfere again. Michael, I'm dancing with my boyfriend, Max, she said. I already danced with you. Another dance, me, he asked and tried to move in, pushing me slightly while staring at Mia. Hey, I said and pushed him away. She doesn't want to dance with you, I told him. With those words, Michael turned to me with anger and malice in his eyes and punched me in the chin. For a second I saw stars, but I didn't fall. Before he could hit me again, I grabbed him and knocked him to the ground. Mia yells at both of us, and then Michael's buddies intervene. I felt my arms being grabbed and pulled away. He got one good kick in the leg as I was being pulled away from him. Now 2 of Michael's buddies were holding my hands, and he still had the same angry look in his eyes as he moved towards me. And that's when Tanner intervened. I told him that Tanner was one of the biggest guys in high school. He was still just as big and authoritative now. He pushed Michael away with force and ordered Michael's buddies to let me go. At that moment, one of the chaperones came up as well. The fight, if it could be called that, was officially over. The escorts conferred, and I noticed one of Michael's buddies talking to one of the escorts, probably a parent. The adult nods as if in agreement. The bottom line of the incident is this. Tanner and I were kicked out of the dance. Any protests we tried to make were quickly quashed. They have home field advantage. Mia and Anna kindly leave with us. As we walk out, I hear Michael say, "See you later, tough guy." We meet glances as all 4 of us leave the ballroom. I'm not used to having enemies. Even on the sports fields, I try to be a good sport and shake my opponent's hand, no matter how sharp the games get. It's a new experience. Tanner and Anna laugh as we walk out. Mia snuggles up to me hostess-like as we all walk out of the Hilton. It's early and we're not full at the dance, Tanner declares. Let's go to Bernie's cafe, he says. We pile into a booth at the cafe and talk a little about the dance. Max, thanks for protecting me, Mia tells me, giving me a hug. Tanner and Anna laughed at the fight. You really showed them, Tiger, Tanner commented with a laugh. Who is that asshole? He asked. Just some guy, Mia replied. A little more than just some guy, added Anna. And then she told us the whole story. This guy, Michael Amos, had been Mia's boyfriend for most of her sophomore year. Over the summer, she caught him with another girl and they broke up. He's been trying to get Mia back ever since. Let's not talk about Michael, Mia interjected. You're my boyfriend now, declared Mia, snuggling up to me on the cafe bench. Boyfriend? Apparently, it was enough to push some guy, get hit. And now my status had changed from dating to boyfriend. The run-in with Michael Amis seemed to have made an impression on Mia. She became more attentive and seemed happy to be with me. For a while, we sat and ate and chatted. I hadn't spent so much time around Anna before. I noticed that aside from her looks, she was also a sweet and considerate person. She inquired if I was hurt after the fight and looked concerned. I assured her that I was fine. We ended up having a good time. Even though we got kicked out of the dance, we still had fun. I also realized how much I liked Mia. I saw a different side of her that night. A good side. I may have started to fall in love with her. And I could also tell that her feelings for me were growing too. I know. Just an innocent high school romance, but it was much deeper than that for me. As the weeks passed, I quickly realized that the time I spent with Mia was the best moments. In addition to enjoying my time with Mia, our relationship was growing too. I got to know her family, and she got to know mine. We did the usual relationship things. Dinners with her family, events with mine, double dates with Tanner and Anna, and lots of fun normal relationship stuff. We also talked about the future. Junior year of high school was the beginning of college preparations. Taking exams, applying, and touring college campuses. In my mind, our relationship was an integral part of the future. Perhaps for Mia, those thoughts weren't as strong. I was an only child. My parents and I were very close. We weren't a big, close-knit family. My dad had one sister who lived near us. My mom's family was from the Midwest, and we didn't see them very often. My dad had his own insurance agency, John Early Insurance. That summer, I started working in his office from 8 in the morning until noon, 3 days a week. The other 2 days of the work week, I helped out at my Aunt Helen's house. Aunt Helen never married and lived in an old house with a huge lot that had belonged to my grandparents in what had once been a suburb. The city limits had passed Helen's lot years ago. New neighborhoods had grown up around it. Her house stood in the center of a large multi-acre lot. Many developers were interested in this valuable piece of land. Helen had no intention of selling it. I was close to Aunt Helen, but she was strange. She was always whispering or humming something, but there was always some kind of noise coming from her. I was used to it, but it was pretty weird. With all the land, there was always something to do. When I showed up to help, she would hand me a to-do list for that day. She was always nice, pleasant, and I could tell she liked me, but she never paid me a dime or thanked me when I finished a job. She always gave me an ice cream sandwich before she left. That was it. One day, coming back from Aunt Helen's, I said to Dad, "She never pays me anything." "Don't worry, you'll get paid," Dad told me. I wondered what he meant. Between working in Dad's office, helping Aunt Helen, and playing football on my own, my summer had been busy. I still had time for Mia. I tried to see her every night if possible, but usually it was a few times a week. In hindsight, things were good with Mia and they just weren't developing. At the end of the summer, before football practice started, my family went on a 2-week trip to California. We went somewhere every year. This year, I was less excited. I'm going to miss Mia. As soon as we got back from vacation, football practice started. Tanner and I drove to practice together, and I realized we hadn't seen much of him over the summer. "How's Anna?" I asked him as I drove home on Monday. "She's fine," carelessly told me Tanner. "What?" I replied. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? Why?" I peppered him with questions. I was in shock at the whole thing. "Easy, Max," Tanner chuckled, looking at my confusion. "Hey, we're going to be seniors." I didn't want to be tied up in my last year of high school," he explained. "But damn, Tanner," I said. "Anna is beautiful and so sweet." "She's perfect," I stated. "Wow," he said. "I guess Max has a little crush on Anna." He looked around and smiled at me. "Tanner," said I. "It's not like that. It's just that you guys are perfect for each other. I thought this was a long time coming for you and Anna, I told him. Max, we're in high school, he said. High school relationships like that don't last. There are a lot of girls out there. Sure, Anna is great, but we're too young to settle down. About 10 years from now, maybe. But not now, he explained. I mulled over his words in silence as we drove home. I thought about Tanner and all those girls. I thought about Mia and our future. And I was also thinking about the beautiful Anna. I picked Mia up Saturday night after her first full week of football. I hadn't had time alone with her since my parents, and I had traveled to California. I couldn't wait to spend time with her. Mia seemed happy to see me, just a little reserved. Probably a little adjustment after the separation, I thought. We drove around and chatted about my vacation and going back to school. Pretty innocent. After I drove her home, I couldn't escape the thought that things were a little off. Maybe we'd just been apart for too long. Maybe we need to regroup a little, I thought. The next week I called and tried to get our relationship back to normal. But something was still not right. I asked her what was wrong. I've just been busy, going back to school and stuff, she replied. My mom is driving me crazy, she added. I see, I said, still feeling like something else had happened. So can we go out Saturday night? I asked, trying to solidify our date. Well, I don't know, she replied. I guess so, I'll let you know. And that was the end of it. Before I could ask any more questions, she made some sort of excuse and disconnected from the phone. We were definitely not back to normal. Saturday morning, there was still no word from Mia. I called once, but there was no answer. I decided that I would drive straight to her house at the usual time. The door was opened by her mom. I always got along with Mrs. Battle. She looked at me with a puzzled expression on her face. Max, she said. Hello, Mrs. Battle, said I. Mia's not home, Max, she said to me. She had a confused look on her face, like she wanted to tell me something, thought about it, and decided to keep quiet. I'll tell Mia you stopped by. And with those words, she closed the door. I didn't miss the pitying expression on her face as the door closed. During my and Mia's relationship, one thing we always managed to do well was communicate. If I texted her, she responded quickly. When we talked about problems, difficulties, minor mishaps, and things like that, we always discussed them. But now it was different. She was shutting me out. For a few minutes, I just sat in the car. The Mia I knew and who had become so close to me wouldn't treat me like this. We talked about the future. We talked about aligning our college plans. In some cases, we also talked about a future together after college, career, home, marriage, and even children. Obviously, something was changing. I just didn't know what it was. Eventually, I left and headed home. I was in a daze. I told myself I wouldn't call her again and again. As much as I wanted to know what was going on, I would not be the pathetic, desperate guy who sacrifices his masculinity. I told myself I wouldn't contact her until I got my first call from her. I considered all of her actions, signs, unspoken feelings. Unfortunately, the logical conclusion was that we were breaking up. She just didn't have the decency to formalize the breakup. Our first football game was on Friday against Roosevelt. During practice that week, I was like I was in a fog. I wasn't concentrating. I wasn't playing aggressively. I was on the verge of being left on the bench. Somehow, I mustered enough energy to keep playing. But with difficulty, we won the game, but it was a lot closer than it should have been. Roosevelt wasn't very good. I definitely didn't play well. I was supposed to be the brains of the defense. Poor execution on my part contributed to the closeness of the game. Over the next week, I received minimal texts from Mia. I was tired of the, what's going on? Are you upset? Etc. questions. I promised myself that I wouldn't whine or beg her to talk to me. She just insisted she was busy. The next week, we lost a football game to the Regis team. We should have beaten them by a margin of 2 touchdowns. In fact, last year, we beat them by a score of 34-10. No matter how I analyzed the game, my poor play was the reason for the loss. Our next opponent was Street Cecilia High School. The Street Cecilia Crusaders were a well-known athletic powerhouse. It was a private school and they were recruiting talented players. Our team, Washington, had a bit of a rivalry with the Crusaders. I wondered if Mia would be at the game. Over the past week, our communication had pretty much stopped. We started the game and they scored almost immediately. But at the end of the first quarter, we led 7-7. Their offense was led by the league's best quarterback, Gabriel Dante. Their running back was Michael Amich, the same guy I got in a fight with at the Christmas party. Amich was a muscular, straightforward runner. The Crusaders scored early in the second quarter. Our offense couldn't do anything against the Crusaders' tough defense. The quarter was winding down and the Crusaders' offense went ahead. On our 9-yard line was the first field goal. We all thought Dante was going to pass, but instead Amich tied the game. Tanner was on a double team, so he was offside. I saw Amich's pass. After hesitating a bit, I moved to fill the hole. Amich tilted his head as we met and ran right through me for a touchdown. As I lay on the lawn, a jubilant Amich ran up to me and stood over me, scattering trash. "Hey, tough guy," he hummed. "Not so tough now. Nice grip." I'm sure Mia enjoyed watching that game, eh? Tough guy? He added with a laugh as his teammates surrounded him. Mia, I thought. What does this have to do with Mia? Halftime in the locker room, and we were losing 21-7. Tanner stood up and addressed the team. "We played like crap for the first half of the game," he proclaimed. "We're better than this. This team is not that good. Stay focused and we will win," he continued. "Don't let this team run over us." And with that comment, he looked right at me. I lowered my head, unable to look him in the eye. The point was clear. Amich had literally run me over. Just as we were getting ready to leave the locker room to start the second half, Tanner grabbed me and pulled me aside. "Max, you need to get your head out of your ass and focus," he told me. I started nodding in passive agreement. This time he pushed me towards the lockers and looked me straight in the eye. "You know Mia is back with Amich," Tanner told me. "He wants to humiliate you in front of her. Now you have a choice. You can be in love and feel sorry for yourself. Or you can let Amich know he's in a football game. Max, you're the smartest guy I know. Focus for fuck's sake," he told me. And with those words, he joined the team on the field. His words lodged deeply in my brain. I was moping around while Mia goes back to Michael Amiche. And here's Amich running right at me and taunting me. And all I did was feel sorry for myself. A new emotion blossomed deep inside me as I ran out for the second half. It was anger. Anger at myself. Anger at the Crusaders. Anger at Amich. But most of all, anger at Mia. We scored right away at the start of the second half, and then it seemed like neither team could continue the offense. About halfway through the third quarter, I saw that the Crusaders had lined up in an unusual formation. I memorized it from the videotape of the game. I quickly told Nat, our cornerback, to go one-on-one with Perkins, their wide receiver. "I'll cover him," I told him. He looked at me, eyes wide, and nodded. As Perkins and Nat rushed past me, I sped up and moved toward the flat surface. And lo and behold, just like on film, Amich comes out flat. Dante's pass was a little high and Amich had to bounce a little, but he caught the ball. Meanwhile, I was quickly approaching him from my position as a free defender. Everything around me slowed down, even though I was moving at full speed. I could see Amich jumping and watching the ball as he moved to catch it. Instinct was telling me to hit it lower. Last time it flew over me when I hit it high. I won't do that again. I saw his left foot firmly planted in the turf. All my weight came to that booted foot, holding it up for that brief moment. I threw myself full speed into that left foot. It didn't stand a chance. The first sound I heard was the crack of breaking bone and the crunch of cartilage, followed by Amich's scream. Amich lost his balance, and I quickly scooped up the ball and ran 57 yards for a touchdown. As I jogged toward my cheering teammates, I glanced over to the St. Cecilia's bleachers. I saw a dark-haired Mia looking at me with tears in her eyes. Unable to resist, I smiled at her. Amich was carried off the field on a stretcher. This seemed to snatch the life from St. Cecilia's ass. The final score was 35-24 Washington. As we lined up to shake hands, there were a few angry comments. Last in line was a guy who I knew was Amich's buddy. I couldn't help it. I was still so angry. Hey Jordan, I turned to Amich's buddy. Tell Michael that I hope he gets better soon, I said with obvious fake sincerity. Fuck you, asshole, was all the guy said. Despite my bravado during the game, I was deeply hurt by Mia's betrayal. I had a horrible feeling that it would be a long time before things got better. They say the opposite of love is indifference. But not for me. It was hate. Senior year of high school flew by, as did 4 years of college. I had always planned to work with my dad at an insurance office. I majored in finance. Many of my friends and classmates changed majors during college. I knew what I was going to do, and it gave me a certain satisfaction. Throughout high school and college, I never had a serious girlfriend. The experience with Mia scarred me. I was betrayed. I put so much emotion and energy into our relationship, and then she cheated on me. She didn't even have the decency to properly break up with me. I learned not to trust women. I never talked to her to find out what happened. Tanner told me briefly that she and Amici had started hanging out over the summer, and things had moved on from there. I couldn't understand it. That's probably why I didn't have a serious relationship with anyone in college. I was afraid of the pain of betrayal. The only satisfaction I got was the realization that I had completely screwed up Michael Amici's chances of playing college football. True, I saw him once, and he walked with a limp. Good. Speaking of college football, Tanner got a scholarship to play football at a small college in Texas. He and I rarely socialized in college, but when we did, it was just like old times. Tanner decided to major in construction management. I graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in finance and dove headfirst into work. My father had a solid business, and I began networking with some of his clients. I was hardworking, sincere, and tried to be an individual. I saw that I had a very good future ahead of me at John Early Insurance. Then tragedy came to our family. At the age of just under 60, Aunt Helen passed away quietly in her sleep one April night. Her heart had failed. It was a sad time for us. We were not a large family. At holidays and celebrations, it was usually just Mom and Dad, Aunt Helen, and me. Now her quirky personality that we all loved began to be missed. A few weeks after her death, Dad and I met with Helen's lawyer. For some reason, Dad insisted that I accompany him to this meeting. Helen had a small investment account that she had left to my father, but the surprise in her will was that her house and all 9.7 acres of prime real estate went to me. To say I was shocked is an understatement. As we were leaving the law office, my father put his arm around my shoulders and said, "Remember how you once told me that Aunt Helen never paid you for all your help?" He asked. I nodded affirmatively. "Well, son, I think you just got paid," he told me. I had inherited not only the house and land, but all of Aunt Helen's belongings. I now appreciated the house from a completely different perspective. Before, it had always been Aunt Helen's house, with flowery curtains, cabinets filled with china and lace doilies. Now it was mine. It was far from a bachelor pad. I had a job. Between owning a house and working at the insurance agency, I was busy. One thing I noticed at work was that my father continued to do what he had been doing for the past 25 years. Times were changing rapidly in the financial products industry, and while Dad would likely serve his clients until his retirement, in order for the business to thrive and grow, we had to be ready for change. One of the first things I did was to take a thorough look at our office. It was outdated. The old wide beige Venetian blinds flaunted on the windows. On the glass front door hung a small cardboard clock with moving hands, signaling our return. Straight out of the 60s. One of the things I thought was important was making a positive first impression. The landscaping in front of the front door was very dated. A large patch of bark overgrown with cracks in the cement walkway. Pressure-treated porch with outdated wooden railing. On either side of the front door stood two bright brass-covered colonial lanterns. Neither of them pointed straight up. The whole thing looked old-fashioned and cheap. It was the first thing I had to do to update the business. We needed to create a different first impression. I called several landscape architects to take a look, give me their thoughts, and suggest a design. To my surprise, when the second of the three landscape firm representatives came to our first meeting, I saw that it was Anne Du Bois, a high school friend of Mia's. At first, I was stunned to see her. All of Mia's negative experiences flashed through my mind. I immediately felt uncomfortable. I felt myself blush as we came face to face. Max, oh my God, she said. Is that really you? She asked with genuine warmth. Ignoring my outstretched hand, she enclosed me in a very nice hug. I immediately began to relax. I remembered the kindness Anna had shown when we were teenagers. How are you doing? She asked. You look great. So, is this your thing? She peppered me with questions. We spent a few minutes catching up. She had graduated with a degree in architecture and was studying for a master's in landscape architecture. She had an apartment in the city and worked as a designer at GL2 Architecture. I briefly told her about my work, but quickly changed the subject to our office and some of my ideas for what I wanted to do for our front entrance. Anna seemed a little surprised that I had switched to business so quickly. She asked a few questions, took some notes, and said she would have some preliminary sketches by Friday. It was so good to see you, Max, she told me with a wide smile on her face. I'll call you at the end of the week, she continued. Another brief hug, and she was gone. Anna looked even better than she did in high school. Same beautiful face and same beautiful body, I thought. Careful, I said to myself. The memories of my experience with Mia were no longer fresh, but still strong. The first architect came in with a huge estimate, so I ruled him off the list. The third postponed the appointment. I hoped Anna had a good plan that would fit into our budget. Thursday afternoon, she called. I have a couple ideas for your entry, Anna told me. Great, I said. I look forward to seeing them. Would you like to meet tomorrow for lunch? She asked. We can meet at the Bluebird any time that's convenient for you, she offered. I hesitated. I know it's a business meeting, but it felt like a date to me. Not that I didn't go on dates at all, though. Rather, her connection to Mia seemed too close to me. I think she sensed my wariness and quickly stepped in. Or I could come by your office if you'd like, she said. No, I said. I can have lunch tomorrow, say 12:30, I asked. She agreed to that time, and we went to meet for lunch. That evening I experienced a mixture of emotions. The anger at Mia hadn't subsided until now. Somehow in my brain, Anna had become associated with that anger. Another thought was the hope that her designs were acceptable and within our budget. And one last lingering thought. Anna was beautiful and I enjoyed her company. Alarm bells rang. When we met at the Bluebird Bistro, she looked even better. She seemed to have taken extra time to look good. I'm sure her appearance helped secure business for GL2. Again, a warm hug is a sign of welcome. We skipped the small talk and moved on to her projects. The first idea was a good one, pretty simple. The second was a little Asian-inspired. I liked that one. Now for the cost. The first option was a little under budget, but the Asian design was $10,000 over our maximum budget. I told her I'd have to think about it. Just then the food arrived and we started talking, but not really about business. She asked where I lived and I told her the story about Aunt Helen and my inheritance. She seemed genuinely interested in my living situation. She knew about the plot of land. Later she asked about my weekend plans. On the weekends I do either the house or the yard, depending on the weather, I told her. When the weather is nice, like this weekend, I spend most of Saturday and Sunday outside. I love gardens and plants, she told me. It must be fun to have so much land. I've described the work on my property many times, I told her, but I've never called it fun. And with a laugh I added, well, I'd love to see it, she said. Maybe one day I'll surprise you and stop by, she said. The next day, Saturday, just like I told Anna, I spent all day working in the yard. There was so much work to do. Aunt Helen had created a formal English garden on most of the property. Sculptural hedges, rose gardens, and planned plantings. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but Aunt Helen's style seemed too old-fashioned. It must have been the middle of the day when I saw dust on the driveway signaling a visitor. Most likely it would have been my mom or dad, but I knew they were out of town. To my surprise, it was Anna. I immediately looked around me, unshaven, dirty, sweaty, and shirtless. I greeted her and immediately reached for my shirt. You didn't need to put it on me, she said. I was just admiring the scenery, she added with a laugh. I looked at her, trying to figure out what she meant. The first thought that ran through my head was, wow, she really works hard to get that contract. I pushed that thought aside and politely gave her a big tour of the property. She seemed genuinely interested. I pointed out things I needed to do, and she made a few suggestions that seemed like good ideas. So, what have you been working on? She asked. I told her, and without hesitation, she said about helping me with my current work. I appreciated her help, but couldn't help but wonder about her motivation. She seemed to be doing everything she could to get the contract. We worked like this, side by side, for several hours. It was a very comfortable environment. I had to admit that I enjoyed her company. Toward the end of the day, she told me I had to go, but she lingered, as if waiting for some kind of invitation from me. I thanked her profusely, showed her to the bathroom to wash up, and then she left with some reluctance. That evening all my thoughts were occupied with Anna. She was beautiful and so sweet, but she had once been friends with Mia. That was a huge minus sign for me. That week we discussed the landscaping proposal. I told her we liked the Asian-themed design better, but it was over budget. I hinted that we had other suggestions, which we didn't. By the end of the week, she came back with minor changes to the original design and a new cost that was only $2,000 over budget. We came to an agreement. She said they could start work in 3 weeks. We need to celebrate, she said. Ha ha ha, I grinned unfunny. Have a good weekend, I told her. She seemed a little discouraged that I didn't support the idea of celebrating. It was another warm weekend, and I worked on my allotment. Saturday afternoon, Anna showed up again. This time with a picnic basket. You can put this in the house, she asked as she handed me the basket. Now, what are we going to work on? I told her, and she set to work. At the end of the day, she asked me to bring a picnic basket and a corkscrew. She spread a tablecloth on the ground. She made a mini feast and brought a Pinot Noir. We had a nice evening, and I really enjoyed talking to her. It seemed like we had a lot in common. I also started to think that since we had already signed with GL2, her firm, there was no reason to keep being nice if that was the only goal. We continued to see each other over the next few weeks. She would either come into the office to get information on our design project, or she would stop by on the weekends and help me around the house. We continued to see each other, and our friendship grew. However, nothing romantic so far. She hadn't made any moves and I, although a big part of me wanted to, there was still a nagging reminder of Mia's betrayal, warning me that I might get hurt. It was Friday night. I left the office around 6 o'clock, went home, and took an evening 5-mile jog. As I was contemplating dinner, my cell phone rang. It was Anna. Anna. Igra. Loud conversations and music could be heard in the background. Getting no answer, I asked hello. Do you have a girlfriend? Replied Anna, slightly inaudibly. Huh, replied he. At that moment, I heard a rustle, then another voice in the background, and then the phone. Hi, Max. My name is Lindsay. I'm Anna's friend, she said. She had a little too much to drink and was talking about driving to your place, but she shouldn't be driving. Can you come to Palantino's and pick her up? She asked. I told her I could. I quickly cleaned myself up and headed downtown. Palantino's is a very nice restaurant and bar. A little too nice to be a pickup bar, more of a date establishment. I found them and met Lindsay. She was quite attractive, but then there was Anna. In my eyes, she was a goddess, no comparison. Anna was a little drunk and apologized for calling. I ordered a beer and Lindsay quickly left. It was just Anna and me. After being at Palantino's for only a few minutes, she asked me, "Can we go to your house?" I agreed, and off we went. We pulled up to the house, and I mentally assessed his condition. I knew it still looked like it was occupied by an elderly single woman. I hadn't had time to do anything inside yet. All my energies were directed outward. Anna didn't seem to care. It was unclear to me where this conversation would lead. Anna, slightly tipsy, asked if I liked her, and I said of course I did. She asked if I had a girlfriend, and I replied that I didn't. I don't mean to sound smug, she said, but guys usually like me. But it doesn't seem that way, she told me. I assured her that she was very attractive. She then asked why I hadn't asked her out. I took a deep breath and talked about my insecurities surrounding my high school relationship with Mia. We talked about it for a bit, and then she brought up Tanner. I know he's your friend, and he can be fun to be with, she said, but he can also be a jerk. I've learned to stay away from self-centered types like that. I'm much better off with a different type of man. She said this and looked me straight in the eye. There was silence for a moment, and my mind whirled. This was all good, I hoped. At that moment, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. I sat and thought, contemplating what the next step should be. I shouldn't have bothered. The next step became quite obvious when she came back. We made love. Thus we began a new chapter in our relationship. I felt like my life was going in the right direction on several fronts. The business was doing well. I was trying to transform our business without interrupting or changing all the positive things that had brought success to my father. My home was being transformed. Anna loved working there. She especially loved gardening, planting, landscaping, and decorating outdoor spaces. More than once, she begged me never to sell this valuable and unique piece of land that she was transforming. And, of course, my relationship with Anna was a beautiful one. The small, uncertain voices of doubt turned into a rare whisper. Anna continued to assure me of her love. There was one thing I had been putting off but knew I had to do. I needed to call Tanner. I had to tell him about my relationship with Anna. I knew it had been almost 9 years since they'd been together, but there was some murky male code we had to follow to some extent. I was dating his ex-girlfriend. As far as I knew, there was no statute of limitations. I had to call him. Tanner lived in Texas. He worked for a big real estate developer on the outskirts of Houston. In my infrequent conversations with him, it looked like things were going well. He claimed he liked it in Texas but wouldn't mind moving back to the Pacific Northwest at some point. I made the call. After a few minutes, I started talking about the reason for my call. Tanner, I began. I'd like to talk to you about something, I said. There was a pause and he was silent. Well, I wanted to let you know that I'm in a relationship with Anna, I told him. Du Bois, he exclaimed after a pause. Disbelief was audible in his tone. Yes, with Anna of St. Cecilia's school, said I. Silence hung on the line at first, and then I heard the rudiments of a giggle coming from Tanner. "Well, congratulations," he said. "She's a great girl. I'm proud of you. I know you've been wary of women for a while," he continued. We talked for a few more minutes, and his casual acceptance of my and Anna's relationship dispelled all my misgivings. When we finished talking, he said, "I'm going to have to get up and visit you all soon." To visit you? It looked like Texas was starting to like Tanner. Months passed, and our relationship seemed to continue to grow. Anna took over the garden and landscaping at my house. We worked side by side to change the whole atmosphere of the place. We were a team working together. I was thinking about making an offer, and discussing it with seemed to remove one obstacle. Now that it was done, I had no doubts. My trust issues had all but disappeared. Anna's assurances that she had feelings for me had extinguished any vestiges of insecurity in me. I started looking for the ring. One of the byproducts of a business like insurance is that you meet a lot of people. You also have to market yourself to those people. It was always nice when I really liked the person I was doing business with. One of my new friend's clients was a man a little older than me named Greg Boston. I first met Greg when I was a client of his. He was building a work shed for me on my property. One evening when he finished the job, we had a beer and got to talking. I told him about my business, and he ended up becoming my client. More importantly, he became a good friend of mine. Greg went from small remodeling jobs like he did for me to building houses. In our neighborhood, the key to being a successful builder was buildable land. Greg was constantly asking me in a good-natured manner if I ever wanted to sell the land. I politely declined. Eventually, I made an offer, and a happy, overjoyed Anna accepted. Now it was up to us to take care of the wedding arrangements. Anna and her mom did most of that work. I became so good friends with Greg that I asked him to be my best man. Tanner I asked to be my best man. One day during the wedding preparations, Anna and I were walking around in the barn that Greg had built. She turned to me with a serious look on her face. "Max, I need to talk to you about something," she said to me. Oh, now what?" I gave her a silent nod. "It's about the guest list." "And Mia," she said. A wave of relief came over me. And here I thought it was something serious. "I have to invite Mia and her husband," she said. "I've known Mia most of my life. She won't be a bridesmaid or anything, just a guest," she said, looking at me intently. I thought about it for a moment. I knew that Anna was still friends, if not said friends, with Mia. I also knew that Mia had married that asshole Michael Lemecki. And I also knew that their friendship had weakened mainly because Anna knew how much I disliked Mia. I discovered another thing. When Anna didn't want to answer a question, she would answer a question with a question. I first suspected this when she was out with friends one evening. When she got home, I asked her who she was with. "Why do you want to know that?" She replied. I suspected that Mia was in the company of friends. I let it pass my ears because I knew she was trying to protect me. But that trait of hers was worth noting. I paused for a moment and said, "Of course, she's an old friend of yours." I realized she must be present. I took the high road. "Thank you," she said. The wedding was wonderful. We played it on our grounds. The gardens and grounds looked fantastic. Anna did a great job with the landscaping and was proud of the work she did. The wedding gave her the opportunity to show how she had transformed everything. There were a few people among the guests that were noteworthy. First, Tanner, a good high school friend of mine and Anna's former boyfriend. Tanner's outgoing personality quickly dispelled any awkwardness surrounding Anna and Tanner's longtime friendship. Speaking of character, even though he was wearing a tuxedo, the Texas influence was evident. Along with the tuxedo, he wore a Stetson hat and black cowboy boots. I lost count of the number of times he said y'all, but he pulled it off. I'd forgotten how much fun Tanner could be. He also brought a date, a stunning blonde with a hint of a European accent. Her name was Greta St. Kitts. She was gorgeous. And though I thought my Anna was beautiful, and I hated to say it, she looked plain next to Greta. And then I realized I had to greet Mia and Michael. I had avoided any contact or conversation about them since high school. Congratulations, buddy, Amici said to me and held out his hand. Thanks, Michael, I said and shook the outstretched hand. Mia headed towards me to give me a hug. I quickly extended my hand in greeting. She hesitated for a moment and then shook my hand. You look beautiful, Mia, I said in greeting. She looked at me as if confused and not believing my sincerity. She opened her mouth to say something, looked around and remained silent. What kind of business are you in? Amici asked me. I briefly told him about my insurance agency and then felt compelled to answer the question. That was a mistake. Amici spent almost 15 minutes talking about his job and how good he was at it. He worked in property management for a company I had heard of, Winegrass Properties. I remembered his friendship with Jordan Winegrass from his high school days. The company had a dubious reputation as a slumlord who used, at best, unethical methods to acquire real estate. Michael said nothing about it. The owner of the company was Jordan's father, Sydney. Stop by sometime, Amici told me. Maybe you can save us some insurance money. And he held out a business card to me. I nodded in affirmation, knowing full well that I wanted nothing in the world to do with Amici or the Winegrasses. Another guest I must mention was our receptionist in the insurance office, Yasmin Reynosa. She was wonderful, hardworking, with a slight accent and just over 5 feet tall. She worked for us for almost 2 years and became an invaluable member of the company. I never met her husband. Saw him a couple times when he picked her up after work and waved to him. But that was it. Yasmin introduced her husband, Angel, to me. If I had to guess just by looking at him, I'd say Angel Reynosa might be in a gang. Tattoos covered his arms and slid down his neck. He also had a rugged look. But the conversation was very polite. Where are you going on your honeymoon? Angel asked. Angel asked. I told him that we were going to Hawaii. He seemed genuinely interested and started asking me about the trip. I told him a little about where we were going and what we would be doing. As we talked, he hugged a miniature Yasmin. Someday, baby, he said to Yasmin, I'm going to take you there. He said it with such sincerity that it touched me. The rest of the wedding went great. We had a good time and the guests seemed to enjoy themselves as well. We honeymooned, as I told Reynosa, in Hawaii and had a wonderful time. It was over and we went back to our normal lives. Only now I was married. Our married life was wonderful. We both worked full-time jobs. We worked out a little plan for the house and grounds. If anything, Anna seemed to be more motivated than I was to get into the work that needed to be done while we transformed Aunt Helen's old house. After the wedding, the photographer we hired asked to come over and take some shots of the grounds. He was impressed. He explained that they were preparing an article for the Sunday paper and were looking for unique scenery. Anna was thrilled about this, plus it was free advertising for her and her landscape architecture firm, GL2. Anna spent every spare hour before the photo shoot working on the gardens. When the photo shoot ran in the Sunday paper, Anna appeared in 2 images. Her photogenic beauty, I believe, was one of the reasons for her appearance. She was also quoted several times in the newspaper article. She seemed to be a natural at working with the media. Another event happened in our lives about a year after we were married. Tanner moved back in. He told me how successful he was in Texas working for a large firm. He thought he could bring some of his experience back to the Pacific Northwest and build his own company. He named it Texas Pacific. Tanner rented an expensive office space downtown. He hired an attractive secretary. He furnished the office with high-end decor. He once told me that to be successful, you have to look successful. I agreed to some extent, but Tanner was on the verge of being apathetic. Tanner became a part of Anna and me. Tanner was single, glamorous, Greta St. Kitts and Tanner were no longer together. I had my moments of jealousy, but for the most part, I was quite comfortable with Tanner, Anna, and I being together. I also became Tanner's insurance agent. I insured his personal property as well as his business. Tanner was categorized as a high-maintenance client. I was constantly calling him because I needed to pay an insurance premium. Several times I had to drive to his office and ask him to give me a check so I could make sure he was uninsured. I had to keep track of everything all the time. It wasn't my responsibility, but I did it for Tanner. You miss a payment, the insurance goes away. One evening, Anna, Tanner, and I were at our house sipping wine and talking about our professional and life goals. I said, I love helping people make good financial choices in their lives. I don't think I'll ever get rich, but I enjoy what I do and I love seeing the people I've helped become successful. I'm happy with a quiet life. After a moment, Anna said, someday I want to start my own landscaping company. I want to be known in the community. I want my work to be shown and discussed. I guess I want to be famous in some way. She laughed a little as she said this, but I knew she meant it. After a few minutes, Tanner spoke up. I'm a little different than both of you, he said. And he spoke in a very uncharacteristically sincere voice. I want to make so much money that I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. I want to have a big score. I want to know that I can leave the business anytime I want to and that it doesn't affect my lifestyle. That's what I want. I watched Tanner in silence. And even though we were good friends, I realized how different we were. Months went by and months added up to years. I often thought about that impromptu conversation about goals that took place between me, Tanner, and Anna on that June evening. I felt that while my goals may not have been as lofty, I was achieving them. Things were going well at the insurance agency. My dad worked 20 to 30 hours a week. He would show up in the morning around 9 o'clock with the paper. I continued to get new clients and was constantly thinking of ideas to expand the business. Anna was working toward her goals too. Less than a year ago, she had left GL2 and was on her own. With the help of my friend Greg Boston, the shed has been transformed into a full office. The shed stands among the many garden designs she has created on my property. It has become a great place for Anne and her business to showcase her landscaping abilities. She landed several landscaping contracts in our backyard while the client wandered the grounds. That left Tanner. As far as I could tell, things were going pretty well for Tanner. He was always active and constantly working on some project or development. I knew from my business dealings with him that at times his cash flow became quite shaky. As I described, I constantly had to remind him to pay his bonus. I wouldn't call him disorganized, more like he was just heavily leveraged. But I knew his purpose. He wanted to make a big deal. One evening in mid-May, he called me and suggested we meet for drinks. He wanted to talk to me about something. Let's meet at Evergreen around 6 p.m., he told me. Evergreen was a nice bar and restaurant aimed at a young party crowd. Not my choice, but it was okay. Max, how are you? He gave me a hug as a greeting and we sat down. I knew Tanner well enough to realize he was in his aggressive salesman mode. I knew he wanted something, I just didn't know what exactly yet. I may have the deal of a lifetime, he began, rubbing his palms together. It's a bit complicated, but it's guaranteed to pay off. I wanted to give you a chance to get in on the deal, Max, he told me. I had no doubt that Tanner considered me a good friend. But I'd spent enough time with him to realize that being involved in this deal wasn't evidence of our friendship. He wanted something from me. Tanner told me that he had an option on a valuable piece of real estate on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. The widow of one of the executives of the firm he worked for in Texas owned the property and was thinking of selling it. Apparently, Tanner had befriended her and always told her that if she wanted to sell the property, she should ask him first. He seemed to have succeeded in charming the elderly widow. Now she was offering the land to Tanner. She wants $1 million for the lot, he excitedly informed me. It should be worth 2 or 3 times that. It's on a beautiful sandy beach. When we build something, we'll get at least $5 million for a house on the beach, he explained. He pulled out a folder and showed me pictures of this bare plot of land, overgrown with shrubs and palm trees. The blue-green sea glistened in the background. I realized how special this property was. I can take out some loans and with the money I have, raise $500,000, Tanner told me. If you put in $500,000, we can buy the property 50-50 THS. I'll create high-end real estate marketing materials. We'll sell the beach properties and in a minimum of 1 year, your money will double. Maximum in 18 months, he continued. His eyes followed my reaction. His enthusiasm was contagious in a way. I sat for a moment and thought about it. He continued to add cogent comments as I mulled over his suggestion. Tanner, I began. Wow, you took me by surprise. It really is a beautiful estate, but $500,000 is a lot of money. I don't have the ability to get that amount immediately. It would require a large secured loan, I told him. All the while he was nodding his head, trying to convey his excitement to me. He talked for a few more minutes about the deal, the property, and the profits. Finally, I told him that I needed to talk to Anna and think it over. For the rest of the evening, Tanner was on a roll. He was enthusiastic about everything. He was in serious sales mode. Max, he exclaimed, you're my best friend. We've known each other for a long time. I truly believe this will be good for us, he told me. I said I'd contact him tomorrow, but it was funny that the more he convinced me, the more wary I was of entering into any kind of partnership with Tanner. Later that evening, I told Anna about Tanner's offer. She was curious about it. If nothing else, she was more interested in the possibility than I was. I had mixed feelings about it, and the more I thought about it, the less enthusiastic I became. I would get some sleep. By mid-morning, I had decided to turn down the offer to invest in real estate for many reasons. The main reasons were two. I was too conservative in my investment philosophy. And the second reason was that I was worried that it might damage my friendship with Tanner in the long run if problems arose. I wrote Tanner and asked if he would agree to meet for lunch. He said yes. I knew he would be disappointed when I told him no, but I wasn't prepared for him to be disappointed. He got angry. That's right, he told me. How can you turn down a $500,000 profit? The friendliness had long since vanished. Now he doubted my intelligence and common sense. Finally, he played his last card. He questioned my friendship. When I tried to explain that I was concerned about how this deal might affect our friendship, he dismissed my arguments. The more animated he became about my refusal to join his deal, the more certain I was that I had made the right decision. Tanner, I said to him at last, if this is as sure a deal as you describe, surely you'll have many more willing to cooperate with you. He just stared at me. I could tell my words made him angry, but I didn't know why. Even Anna thinks it's a good deal, he told me. Anna? Said I. Have you talked to Anna about this? I asked. Since when does he talk to Anna about such things? An emotion flashed through my brain that I thought I was long over. Jealousy. He tried to explain that he wanted her landscaping ideas for the proposed site. I thought. We'll have to listen to Anna. When we left the house, it was nowhere near as warm with enthusiasm as the night before. There was now a small gulf separating our friendship. It will be interesting to see how this all develops. Weeks passed. Anna told me that she had been talking to Tanner about the property, and he asked her about the tropical landscape. She was eager to share her ideas about the project with him. She said she hadn't worked with tropical design before and was interested. She told me she thought investing in the land was a good deal, but also understood why I had declined. Gradually, over the course of a few weeks, my friendship with Tanner recovered to some extent. We were doing business together, so we needed to talk. I never asked him about the project, but it seemed to me that he was pushing the plan in some way. One day I stopped by his office to pick up another almost belated bonus check. I saw a glossy brochure with a picture of a magnificent tropical house. I knew immediately that it was on that beautiful beachfront property on Kauai. While I was looking at it, Tanner came out of his office. He told me that he had an interested party in this house. He told me that he had personally raised the money, made the loan, and bought the land on Kauai. He said he is almost finished building a large rustic cedar house on a large lot in the wine country. Once he finishes work on it, he will temporarily move to Kauai to start building the estate in about a month. I asked about the deal to sell the estate on Kauai. It will sell for $5.5 million, he told me. Wow, $5.5 million, exclaimed I. Who's the buyer? I asked. A local guy, actually, said Tanner. You know Sydney Winegrass? Yeah, I knew who Sydney Winegrass was. He's got that asshole Michael Amiki working for him. He didn't have a very good reputation, but I assumed he was rich. Tanner, I said, be careful about dealing with Winegrass. I've heard some not very good things about him and his business. Max, Tanner said. Don't worry, I know Sid. We've done business together. He's a great guy. Tanner brushed off my concerns. A few days later, Anna came in and said she had a new client. Tanner. She explained that she would create a design for a beachfront home he was building on Kauai. I'm excited about it, she said. I've always wanted to do a tropical project, she said. What will it require of you? I asked. Most of the work will be done in my office, but I was hoping that in October, when I need to be there, you and I could take a second honeymoon, and it will be a tax write-off, she told me. It actually sounded wonderful, especially in March in the Pacific Northwest, when rain, wind, and cold seem to be a regular part of life. A warm tropical vacation sounds wonderful, and I would love to see this house. Plus, I felt it would benefit our relationship, revitalize it. A week later, Anna burst in on me with another piece of potentially good news. One of the local TV stations, KPL, wanted to add a weekly garden program, and they wanted to talk to Anna about hosting it. Life seemed to be moving in a positive direction for both Anna and me. All was well, although I was beginning to feel a bit like Anna and my connection wasn't as strong. I attributed it to the fact that we were both busy. One evening, Tanner, Anna, and I went for a walk. Tanner was scheduled to leave for Kauai in the next few days. We discussed our second honeymoon work vacation in October, when we would see Tanner's place of employment. Tanner talked a bit about the finances involved in buying a lot and building a beach house on Kauai. It was complicated. I couldn't figure out how legal it all was. He seemed to be mixing funds. The money to complete the cabin and wine country could have gone to pay for part of the estate on Kauai. It was complicated and, to say the least, unethical. The way I set it up, he told us, when we close on the sale of the Kauai estate, I should get almost $4 million after taxes. He smiled and leaned back in his chair. I hoped he could make it work, but I had some doubts. After listening to him, I had no doubts about my decision not to enter into a real estate partnership with him. As we parted ways with Tanner and drove home, I voiced some of my concerns about Tanner's risky deal. Can't you just be happy for him? Said Anna. Just because he's taking a bigger risk than you don't mean he's doing the wrong thing, she told me. I didn't say anything back. I was surprised by her defense of Tanner. A few months later, Anna interviewed with KPL, a local TV station that was looking for a gardener to host a weekly program on Fridays. The idea was to get local garden centers to sponsor the show and encourage homeowners to plan garden projects for the upcoming weekend. She was nervous and anxious. Anna looked great and was photogenic, and that was going to play in her favor. She also had beautiful gardens on my property that she had created to serve as a backdrop for her weekly gardening tips. And she also had a shed office that could be converted into a makeshift studio. In early September, She was contacted by KPL and offered a contract to host a weekly program in the garden with Anna, beginning in late November through the holidays, and then again in late winter. Anna was thrilled. Not only was she getting a paycheck from KPL, but she was also getting free advertising for her landscaping company, Distinctive Gardens. All of this was great news. I felt like she had been putting a lot of energy into her career lately, and rightfully so. However, I couldn't escape the thought that less of her energy was now directed towards us. We began discussing our trip to Kauai. Anna had been corresponding with Tanner about the oceanfront project on Kauai. Things seemed to be progressing, but perhaps not as smoothly as Tanner had envisioned. I wasn't really sure how often she talked to Tanner, but several times I stopped by her office when she was talking to him, and what I heard didn't seem to be business related. More like small talk. We were to leave on Friday and stay the following weekend, 8 days at the Sheraton Hotel on Kauai. I was looking forward to the break. I think we needed a good vacation to get our relationship back on track. My dad and Yasmin would take care of everything while I was gone. I knew that with Yasmin, everything would be in good hands. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, disaster struck. My father had a heart attack. He was at home, and he started having chest pains. My mom called me and 911. The ambulance took my dad to St. Luke's Hospital. Anna and I met Mom at the hospital. Dad was conscious, but he was in pain. We stayed with him for a few minutes before we were escorted out by his nurse. Later we met with the cardiologist, and he said my dad would be in the hospital for a few days and then on bed rest at home. Both Anna and I knew what that meant. No trip to Kauai was in the cards for me. Not only did I need to support my parents, but I needed to be in the office during the week. Anna said she would stay home too, but we both knew she needed to be on site to oversee the landscaping. I was busy with my dad. We both decided she should go and then try to get home as soon as possible. We would celebrate our second honeymoon at another time. My father was still in the hospital when I drove Anna to the airport. I was consumed with worry about my father's health and didn't seem to think much about Anna's trip. During the trip, I tried to focus on her, telling her how much I would miss her and asking her to take time to relax and enjoy Hawaii. We said our goodbyes with hugs and kisses. She quickly disappeared into the long security screening line at the airport. I promised to call her daily. I went back to my father's bedside. On Saturday, my father was discharged with clear instructions to follow bed rest. Doctors were considering surgical options, including bypass surgery. My mom and I were to be at his bedside for the next week to make sure he was recovering properly. My dad always went to bed early and got up early. I told my mom that I would be there by 5 in the morning on Sunday to be by his side and give my mom a chance to get some sleep. She released me around 9 in the morning. As I was driving home, I was surprised to get a call from Tanner. He asked about my dad and then asked me to stop by a construction site in wine country, a big cedar house he was just finishing up. He needed something the inspector had left behind. I told him I would be with my dad today, but I could get it sometime next week. He replied that any time during the week. I also told him that his insurance premium was overdue. Yeah, I'll get it for you, he told me. Typical. I'll have to swing by his office and pick up a check. When I was on the phone, I wished I was in Hawaii with Anna. I think the quiet Hawaiian music I heard in the background while I was talking to Tanner was to blame. It made me think of our honeymoon trip. I associated Hawaiian music with the wonderful time we spent there. I decided to call Anna. It took a few moments, but she sleepily answered. Good morning, she greeted me. And then it came to me that it was still early there. There is a 3-hour time difference between Hawaii and the West Coast. It was only 6 in the morning on Kauai. I forgot how early it is. Sorry, I told her. That's okay. How's your dad? She asked. We continued talking about my dad and her trip. I longed to be with her. I envisioned the open doors to the balcony, the warm breeze, the sound of the ocean, the tropical smell in the air, and the constant, beautiful Hawaiian music. We were just talking, and I was about to discuss a couple more things with her when my mom called, and I had to disconnect. I'll call you later, I told her, and switched to talking to mom. I had lunch with dad while mom ran errands. When she came back, she asked if I could do some chores around the house while she sat with dad. I accepted the chores and thought of Anna on Kauai and wished I was there again. I thought back to our brief conversation and the sensual images of Hawaii. Beaches, palm trees, sunsets, music. Music? I started thinking about music. I remembered the music playing in the background as I talked to Anna. I also remembered the same music when I was talking to Tanner. I was seized by a flash of suspicious jealousy. I analyzed the facts. Tanner called me and I heard Hawaiian music. A few minutes later, I called Anna. It was still early Sunday morning in Hawaii. It sounded like Anna was in bed and had just woken up. I heard the same Hawaiian music. Were they together? And if so, what were they doing together at 6 o'clock Sunday morning? Was I being paranoid? Maybe Tanner was just staying at the same hotel as Anna and the music was coming from the speakers? For a moment, it seemed possible and I relaxed. But if you think about it, Tanner wouldn't have stayed at the 300 plus a night Sheridan for months on end while he worked on his beach house. He needed to find other, more economical accommodations. Did Tanner spend the night with Anna? I decided to call Anna. I told her my father was feeling better, and we made small talk. Nothing concrete. Then I decided to ask a few questions. I asked her about the project and some general questions. Did you get to hang out with Tanner after work? I asked innocently. She hesitated. Why do you ask? She replied, oh, I knew that when she didn't want to answer a question, she asked it back. I didn't say anything like that to her. I said nonchalantly. Just asking, I said. I mean, I saw him at the construction site, she told me. That's all, she said. I kept the conversation light, but alarm bells were ringing in my soul. I didn't have definitive proof, but I had some clues that reinforced my suspicions. Later, I called Tanner, ostensibly to remind him about the overdue bonus. Yeah, I know, he said. I'll contact Bernadette in the morning. I kept the conversation light, nothing specific, just the usual chatter. I then thanked him for taking care of Anna while she was there alone. No problem, he replied. Can't have my buddy's beautiful wife left unattended at night, he added. We talked some more and then I walked out. Something wasn't right. Anna had told me that she only met Tanner at the construction site, but in the evening Tanner would take her to places she'd been. The stories didn't add up, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that anything was going on. Just a lot of evidence. I began to formulate a plan. I made a phone call and set up a meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Monday morning I met with Yasmin and Angel Reynosa at the office. I asked them for complete confidentiality. They agreed. I explained to them my concerns about Anna and Tanner. They asked no questions, just listened. I asked them if they could go to Kauai and do an informal investigation. I gave them a folder with pictures of Tanner and Anna for identification. When Mr. Max asked Angel, when do you want us to do it? He asked. Tomorrow, I told them. I want you to be there until next Sunday. You'll be staying at the same hotel as Anna. Just keep an eye on her. If nothing happens, just enjoy the week, I explained. Angel and Yasmin immediately agreed. I told Yasmin that I would make all the arrangements and gave them $1,000 for expenses besides lodging and airfare. I told them I would drive them to the airport in the morning, but not a word to anyone about why they were traveling. They agreed. As they were leaving the office, Angel stopped me. Mr. Max, he said. Thank you. If you ever need a favor, ask Angel, he said to me. He looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and left. Maybe I'm paranoid, But hearing Renosa say that Anna and Tanner were innocent of everything my overly jealous imagination had conjured up cost me a few $1,000s. I continued to call Anna daily, but not once did I get any indication from her that anything untoward had happened. I was starting to feel a little silly about my paranoia and sending Renosa to spy. Thursday afternoon, I decided to head out to Tanner's nearly completed project in wine country. He asked me to pick up one document from the county. As soon as I pulled up to the house, I got a call from Yasmin. I told them not to call unless there was something to report. I expected her to tell me everything was fine, but it wasn't. Max, she began. Angel took some pictures you need to see, she told me. I asked her to tell me, but all she kept repeating was, "You look at the pictures." I heard my phone beeping with received messages. I told her I would call her back. There were 4 pictures. The photos documented my wife's infidelity. I sat on a 5-gallon bucket in the garage at home. I was devastated. My wife and my best friend. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd been through with Mia in those years, now it was all happening again. But worse, much worse. I don't know exactly how long I sat there, but more than an hour, contemplating the fact that the life I knew was ending. I didn't know what to do. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive him? The answers were no and hell no. And then 2 things started happening to me. 1, anger started creeping into my brain. White-hot anger. 2, I started getting dizzy from the oil-based paint that had been applied to the cedar shingles. I saw a pile of oily rags in the corner of the garage. In one of my insurance classes, I remembered the danger of oiled rags spontaneously combusting. I went to shift them, but suddenly stopped. I carefully put on a pair of lightweight gloves. I gathered up all the rags and put them in a metal bucket, stacking them in a pile. I poured some more oil-based stain into the bucket. Next to the bucket, I put a bundle of number 1 cedar shingles. Then I turned on the heater next to the bucket of oiled rags. Then I walked away. I took the document Tanner needed and left. Here in wine country, there were no neighbors nearby. Besides, I had a purpose for being here. If the burning really happened, how could anyone blame me? I remembered we were discussing spontaneous combustion. It occurs when oiled rags or cloth are slowly heated to ignition temperature by oxidation. As the substance oxidizes, it begins to release heat. If this heat has no outlet, such as in a pile, the temperature will rise to a level high enough to ignite the oil and set the rag or cloth on fire. The fire from this can quickly spread to other combustible materials and cause a lot of damage. I sent Tanner a message that I had the document. I later received a thank you in response. I also started thinking about Tanner's insurance. It was now expired. I had texted him about it several times earlier in the week. There was no way I could stop by his place to get it. He technically didn't have fire insurance at the moment. I thought about Anna. I couldn't forgive her. There was no way she could realize how much she had hurt me. I just wished she could experience the same pain. After a few minutes, I had an idea. I called Greg Boston, a friend of mine who is a builder. We agreed to meet tonight. I told him it was very important and urgent. We met at a small restaurant. He looked at me and realized something was wrong. He asked, and I brushed him off. "Greg, you've asked me about my land several times already." I told him, and he nodded. "I want to sell it, but I have a few conditions," I told him. "The most important one is that I want the house and garden cleared and dismantled in the next 3 days." He almost choked when he heard the timetable. 3 days, he whispered. "That's impossible," he told me. I told him that if it wasn't, I'd find someone who could do it. "Wait, Max, let me think about it," he said. After a moment, he said he thought he could do it, but it would be complicated. We discussed the price and one other important condition. We had a gentleman's agreement. We shook hands, and he would start work tomorrow. "Max, as a friend, I have to ask you what's going on," he said. "Greg," I said. We'll discuss it someday, but today is not that day, I told him. He nodded, and we both left. That night my phone rang on the nightstand. Tanner. I didn't pick up the phone. When I woke up, I had an urgent voicemail from Tanner asking me to call him. I took my time. I flipped through the morning news. Fire in Yamhill County for alarms. Wine country. No one was hurt. The house was empty. But it was completely destroyed. On the way out, I called Tanner, and he answered in desperation. Max, the house we were finishing up burned down, he said. I need the money. When can we get reimbursed? He asked. Wait, I said. What house? I was becoming quite a good actor. He started talking about the house, his cash flow that had merged with the house he was building for Winegrass on Kauai. He was in a panic, jumping from one topic to another. I wasn't sure I could help him even if I wanted to. And I didn't want to. Tanner, I said calmly. Let me go to the office and take a look at things. We can talk later. Did you tell Bernadette to send the bonus check? I asked. What? He hissed. Didn't you get it? I think I asked her to. Does it matter? He continued. I told him I'd look into it and disconnected. He was still talking when I hung up. I had no intention of continuing the conversation. Our friendship was over. Now I had to deal with Anna. Over the next few days, I called Anna and tried my best to act normal. I think she sensed something was wrong, but she didn't say anything. I received some more pictures from Angel Reynosa. They only confirmed the previous pictures. Tanner kept calling. Each voicemail sounded more and more desperate. Anna was supposed to come home on Monday, the day after tomorrow. I hadn't said anything to my parents yet. Dad didn't need to be put under any more stress. And I needed Mom to focus on Dad. Greg Boston had several vehicles of heavy equipment, graders, backhoes, tractors, preparing the land for development. I had several capsules delivered and placed all of Anna's personal and business belongings in one. My belongings went into another. It was so strange driving up to my plot of land. The skyline was completely different. No house, no gardens. Anna's flight arrived around 6 p.m. that Monday night. I picked her up in my arms and hugged her. When she kissed me on the lips, I turned around and the kiss landed on my cheek. She threw a questioning look at me. I ignored it and asked how the flight went. On the way home, she realized something was wrong. We talked for a few minutes about the fire. But after a short conversation, I changed the subject. I wasn't a bad actor, but this betrayal I couldn't quite disguise. I suggested we stop at a small bar on the way home. Max, I've been on the road for 6 hours. I just want to get home, she said. It'll only take a minute, I told her, and pulled into the bar. As we sat down and had a glass each, she looked at me, puzzled. What was so important we had to do to stop? She asked. I handed her the folder of photos Angel had sent me. I printed them out. When she opened them, she gasped. She moved her gaze from the pictures to me and back to the pictures again. Max, it's not what it seems, she began. I hung out with Tanner for a little while, but nothing much happened, she said. You have to believe me. I withheld one photo, a picture that made it clear what they were doing. Did nothing really happen? I asked. She was sobbing. She told me how sorry she was. She said things had gotten out of hand. Tanner was aggressive and persuasive. He made her feel young again. We can get through this. It'll never happen again. And so on, and so on, and so on. I had been waiting for this. Anna, I said with calm, controlled anger. I'm not sure you realize how deeply you've hurt me. I hope one day, and it will probably be soon, you feel the same pain, I told her. Max, I'm really sorry, she sobbed. Can't we just go home and try to work things out? She pleaded. Yeah, I said. It's time to go home, and off we went. For the rest of the trip, I didn't say anything. Anna sobbed and begged for forgiveness. I remained silent. I wondered at what point Anna would realize that things had changed. It didn't take long to wait. Max, she asked as we got closer. What? What's going on? She saw heavy equipment and a house razed to the ground. She continued to stare into the twilight as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I remained silent, waiting for a reaction. Muksh, muksh. Her head swiveled between her changed appearance and looking at me. Where is everything? My house, my office, my gardens? Her voice rose. I've decided to develop this estate. I got a good offer for the land, I told her calmly. They're going to build 28 houses. I got a very good price. I think it will work out, I told her with false enthusiasm. You sold our house. What about my gardens? My business? She was furious. And then it hit her. What about my TV show? She wailed. I shrugged, raising my palms to the sky in a oh well gesture. Anna walked through what had once been her garden. Pieces of once neatly planted shrubs and flowers mingled with the damp earth that had been loosened by heavy machinery. For several minutes, she just stood still, contemplating the changed landscape. Did you do this to hurt me? She asked. She asked. She asked. Is this my punishment? She shouted at me. I remained silent. Answer me. Answer me, you goddamn asshole. She shouted. And then she collapsed into a sitting position, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was probably in the same pain as I was. I felt absolutely no sympathy. Did I hurt you? I asked with exaggerated disbelief. We're married. And you're flying off to Hawaii while I'm taking care of my sick father and having fun with my best friend, I told her. When I found that out, I realized my life had changed. Forever. With that, I decided to make other changes as well. Your stuff is in this pod, I pointed to the closest one. And here are your car keys. I held out the keys to her. I need to get to my folks. You may have to stay with your family, I told her and started walking to my car. Muksh, she shouted. Well, this is it. You ruined my garden, ruined my career plans, and now you're just walking away? Is that all our marriage is worth? She asked. I turned to her and stared at her. Don't you dare question my commitment to our marriage, I told her. We'll talk about everything, but not today. And I left. The next morning at the office, I told Yasmin everything that had happened. She knew almost everything. I also told her that Tanner would be calling and for her to act as my gatekeeper. Yasmin also confirmed that we never received a check for the insurance payment from either Tanner or Texas Pacific. Their insurance was officially canceled last Monday. 3 days before the house fire in wine country, the Yamhill County Fire Marshal paid me a visit mid-morning. Somehow, probably through Tanner, he was informed that I had been at the house on Thursday, the day of the fire. I told him that yes, I was there. I was picking up papers at Tanner's request. He asked if I noticed anything, if I smelled anything, if I looked any different. I replied that I had only been in this house once, a few months ago, so I had nothing to compare it to. But no, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. I then asked if they had determined the cause of the fire. Nothing official yet, but, he said, it could have been a spontaneous combustion, he told me. I furrowed my brow and looked at him with a confused expression. Spontaneous? What? I asked. He went on to explain the properties of spontaneous combustion. I nodded, asked a few curious questions, and then he walked away. That was the last I heard of the fire department. I asked Yasmin to handle Tanner's claims against Guarantor, the company we represent for property and liability insurance. I didn't want to be involved in this case. My anger at Anna was overshadowed only by my anger at Tanner. Tanner kept trying to reach me on both my cell phone and my office phone. I ignored the cell phone and Yasmin was rejecting calls from the office. He seemed to be getting more and more desperate. Yasmin began the process of getting an insurance claim through Guarantor for Tanner. But if I had known how insurance companies work, it would have been difficult to get a claim with a late payment. After numerous attempts, I finally accepted Anna's early morning phone call. Max, she said, we need to talk. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I need you, she continued. I decided that this meeting was inevitable. I was still in a daze from her betrayal, but I wanted to understand it. What she was doing to Tanner during what was supposed to be our second honeymoon was more than unacceptable. Okay, I agreed. Let's meet at the Coffee Clutch in Old Town at 4 in the afternoon. Having said that, I hung up the phone when she had already agreed to meet. We met without a hug or any physical interaction. She kept looking at me as if assessing my state of mind. Angry, sad, forgiving. She wanted to see where I was going with this. I decided to begin. Anna, I began. When we first met, you, of all people, knew how much I had been hurt by my relationship with Mia in high school. I know, and I felt so bad that She interrupted me. I held up my hand. Anna, I said, calmly but with irritation. Let me finish. You'll have your turn, but I think it's important for you to hear where I'm going with this. She nodded her head in silent assent. After Mia, I continued. I pretty much decided to live my life as a hardened bachelor. I went on dates, but nothing serious. But then you came along. You cheered me up. I thought you understood. I trusted you. I thought I was healed. And now this. You cheated not only on me, but on your ex-boyfriend, my best friend. I'd be very curious to know why, I told her. She went on for a few minutes about how sorry she was and what a big mistake it was. I looked at her with a stoned face, trying to find some forgiveness. Then she told me the story. She was excited about going to Hawaii, even though I wasn't there. She said the sounds, sights, and smells reminded her of how wonderful our honeymoon had been. She was in a good mood. Tanner picked her up at the small airport in Laihu. On the way to Kaloa, he took her past a construction site. She said she was surprised at how little had been done. Still, Tanner remained optimistic about the progress. They drove to the Sheraton Hotel, and Tanner insisted on taking her to dinner that evening. He picked her up at 7 o'clock, and they went to a local establishment, Kyoki's Paradise. She was in a good mood. He was in a good mood, and apparently the tropical drinks were flowing in a river. Tanner started talking about the old days. After dinner, they strolled along the beach in front of the Sheraton Hotel with their shoes off. Tanner continued to reminisce about their past relationship. Anna said she was tipsy, happy, and discussing her high school days with Tanner made her feel young. Tanner insisted on a late-night cocktail and asked her to show him her room. That night, he entertained her. Anna said she knew it was so wrong, but at the same time, she thought, since I'll never know, it'll just be an affair. She would put it out of her mind and never talk about it again. According to her, they continued to communicate while she was on Kauai. Max, please don't ruin our lives over something as insignificant as sex. He means nothing to me. Tanner means nothing to me. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Please, I'm begging you. Please at least think about it, she begged. I agreed to think about it. The next day, I served her with a divorce petition. The thing is, that night, after leaving Anna at Coffee Clutch, I did think about it. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I finally realized that no matter what, I could never fully trust her again. I couldn't live like that. She called me, texted me, and finally came to the office when I didn't answer. She stormed into the office, angry at me for serving her. She said I promised to think about it. Why did I give up on our marriage? Did I have no compassion? Have I never made mistakes? And so on. I hardly spoke at all. Then she brought up the fact that I had ruined her business opportunities at CPL. Apparently, without her gardens, they were reviewing in the garden with Anna. The gardens were supposed to be the backdrop. Without them, the appeal of the show was diminishing. My silence seemed to anger her. She then claimed she was entitled to half of our property, including the house and land. Anna, that land is in a family trust. My Aunt Helen arranged it that way, I told her. And even still, I looked after this property before you and I got together. I consulted my attorney. You have no rights to the property or anything in the trust, I told her. Now, if you don't mind, I have some more work to finish up. And with those words, I tilted the computer screen toward me and started working. She sat for a minute, got up, walked out, and slammed the door as she left. It wasn't until 3 days later that Tanner showed up at my office. I thought he was still in Hawaii. I heard a noise in the reception area where Yasmin was sitting. Before I could investigate, Tanner burst into my office. Get out, I said to him, pointing to the exit. Max, give me a minute. I've earned it. I need to talk to you, not to. And he pointed his thumb back to where Yasmin was now standing. I was pissed, but I was also curious what he had to say about his financial situation and his contact with Anna. I need you to get this lawsuit settled, he told me with a desperation I'd never seen in Max before. I'm running out of time with the real estate in Hawaii. I need the money from the Wine Village house to finish the beach house. He spoke incoherently. I pondered his words. It sounded like he had mortgaged the Wine Village house to buy a lot on Kauai. Then he took a deposit from Winegrass to finish the country house. Then he mortgaged the lot on Kauai to get materials to build a house on the shore. Or something like that. Eventually, he had a lot of borrowed capital, and he owed Sydney Winegrass a shore house. First of all, I told him, instead of spending time in Hawaii, you should have paid your insurance premium. Second, I don't control the claims. The guarantor decides whether a claim is valid. I don't. I'm just an agent. Third, I doubt you will get reimbursed for the claim. Your policy was canceled for lack of payment. Finally, get out of here. I never want to see you again, I told him. Max, he started and really turned on the charm. Look, the deal with Anna was nothing. It was just for old time's sake. It didn't mean anything. She loves you. You're all she talks about. He was really pouring in. I interrupted him. Get out, I growled. Finally, he walked away. I thought about what he had done. I still couldn't keep track of all the loans and mortgages, but one thing I knew for sure. He was in deep shit with Sydney Winegrass. Not a man I wanted to get on the bad side of. Life over the next week or two went on as normal. Greg Boston was turning Aunt Helen's old property into what was going to be a neighborhood at some point. My father was getting better too. Anna had gotten a lawyer, and our lawyers were sorting through the property, gradually unraveling the financial components of our marriage. The emotional part was like a dark cloud engulfing me. Surrounded by other people, I tried to stay upbeat and positive. But when I was alone, it was very difficult. I had dark thoughts, mostly about Tanner and Anna. I decided to see a psychologist. Gradually, faint glimmers began to appear in my life, approaching positivity. One evening, a few weeks after my last encounter with Tanner, I met up with a couple of friends for drinks and food at a casual restaurant outside of town. Heading towards the dark parking lot, I began to think that maybe my life would become normal again. As I approached my car, I noticed several people near where I parked. Two large men seemed to be loitering near my car. A black Chrysler 300 with custom wheels was parked nearby. As I moved to get into the car, the two guys approached me. Hey, what? I said as each of them grabbed my arm. Hey, buddy, I heard and turned around to see Michael Amich walking towards me. Mr. Winegrass wants to talk to you, buddy, said Amiche. He can make an appointment for me in the morning. I'm done for the day, said I to Amich. With that, I started struggling to free myself from the two thugs. Their grip was getting tighter and tighter. While I was squirming, Amich the freak came up and punched me from behind in the face. For a moment, as blood flowed from my lip, I was stunned. Mr. Winegrass wants to see you, he informed me. Guys, put him in the back seat, he ordered the thugs. It wasn't real. I was being kidnapped. I was sure Winegrass was digging into his deal with Tanner and somehow thought I had something to do with it. I was sure I could explain my lack of involvement, but it all seemed so rude. I couldn't ignore the fear I was feeling. Our destination was an old building in an industrial part of downtown, not far from the docks. It was deserted at this time of day. There were no interested observers coming to my aid. I was dragged into a dark basement. I noticed that the egress windows here were boarded up. There was a musty odor and water dripped down the stone walls in places. Soon I noticed something else. Tanner was sitting on a wooden chair taped in the shade. He looked a little battered, and there was a look of desperation in his cloaked expression. It was a far cry from the confident personality he usually wore. Amich and one of the thugs left after I was duct-taped to the same chair. One guy silently stayed with us in this gloomy dungeon. Soon Amich and the other asshole returned. Mr. Winegrass is delayed. He'll be here soon, told us Amich. In the meantime, buddy, you and I have unfinished business. He stared at me. Remember when you messed up my leg? He asked. I remained silent. It's time for revenge, he told me. And with those words, Michael Amich beat me as I sat strapped to a chair. He punched me in the face over and over again. I knew I had lost my teeth and probably broken my nose. I may have passed out. My eyes had turned into slits because of swelling. He seemed to be enjoying the action immensely. Fortunately, Amich's cell phone rang. Mr. Winegrass is on his way, he said, wiping my blood off his hands with a rag. The three of them went upstairs to wait. Mux, Donner whispered to me. Winegrass needs the money. We need to stick together. I can find $500,000 to pay him off. Can you get $1 million? I think we can work out a deal, but we need to stick together. Okay, Mux. With my injuries, it was hard to speak. At that moment, Amich, the two thugs, and Sidney Winegrass came down the stairs. Winegrass was dressed in a tailored black suit, a white shirt, and a knotted red tie. Winegrass was lean, with styled dark hair slicked back from his forehead. His appearance was Lupin. Michael, turn on the lights, he ordered. I want to see what I'm dealing with. Amich quickly turned on the single overhead light. Winegrass, with his hands clasped behind his back, walked around the basement, circling us and studying Tanner and me. Sid, Mr. Winegrass, Tanner began. As soon as I get the insurance money, I can pay you back. I just need Max to approve it. He should have gotten the check from me at my office. He talked nonstop. So much for keeping us together. Putting his hands behind his back, Winegrass turned to us. Gentlemen, I am an honest businessman. I try to find a deal that will satisfy all parties. I believe that's the best way to do business. Everyone gets their beak, he continued. But I never want to show weakness. When you, as a businessman, show weakness, your partners, your competitors, even those you thought were friends, will try to take advantage of you. I can't do business that way, he explained. So, Mr. Bishop, he turned to Tanner. We agreed that you would build me a beautiful home in Hawaii. I like the idea of a house in a tropical place. I give you the money, and you spend it on finishing some other house, and then that house burns down. And you tell me you don't have insurance? Is that true? He asks. Tanner rambles something about the insurance company, about how I should have gotten a check and straightened everything out, and so on. In his desperation, he doesn't give it much thought. Winegrass clapped his hands, calling for silence. Mr. Early, he nodded in my direction. As an insurance agent, you must take care of your client, Mr. Bishop. Now he nodded toward Tanner. And Mr. Bishop claims it's your fault he's uninsured. And now Mr. Bishop has filed for bankruptcy. And I don't have the tropical home I paid for. I ask you both, is that fair? He looks at Tanner and me. Tanner immediately starts his story about how I should have picked up the check, that it wasn't his fault, and so on. I can see that Winegrass is starting to get angry. The more Tanner makes excuses, the angrier he gets. Finally, he turns to Emiki. Get rid of both of them. And heads for the stairs. Tanner freaks out, struggling and making excuses that it wasn't his fault. Winegrass continues toward the stairs while the thugs move toward Tanner and me. Mr. Winegrass, I say. It's the first time I've spoken, and I'm having trouble enunciating the words with my battered face. Can I ask you a question? He stops and partially turns to me. He nods as if to say, go ahead. As a businessman, you have insured your assets, including your property, I suspect, I say. Winegrass doesn't answer but listens. I ask you, does your insurance agent come to your office to collect a check for the premium? Or do you yourself or someone in your office mail it when it's due? He looks at me. Tanner starts to interrupt but is told to shut up. And one more question, I say. If you have a tenant who rents a property from you and he doesn't pay when he's supposed to, is that your fault? He starts nodding affirmatively, as if he understands my point. If you'll excuse me and just loosen one hand, I want to show you something else. He nods to the first thug to cut the duct tape. I reach into my pocket and carefully pull out my iPhone, holding it out to the thug. The bonus was due October 15th, I say, and Winegrass is already studying my iPhone. As you can see, I sent him text messages reminding him of the premiums on October 6th, 8th, and 13th. If you look at my sent emails, you'll see that I texted him on October 9th and also on the 11th. You will see in my letters that I reemphasize the importance of payment. I tell him. Winegrass is studying what I assume are my letters to Tanner intently. I agree with you, I say to Winegrass. Part of my job is to take care of my clients. In my opinion, if I contact them 5 times during the week, the client will have ample opportunity to pay for the services I provide. I think that's fair. Don't you? I ask. With that, he looks away, nodding his head, his index finger tapping his compressed lips. He's thoughtful for a moment. Finally, he turns to Amiki. Michael, take Mr. Rano to his car, he says to Amici. And, Mr. Early, not a word about this to anyone. Please know I know where you live, where you work, and I know the people close to you. Am I making myself clear? He asks. I nod silently in agreement. As much as I want to communicate this, I don't want to spend the rest of my life worrying and looking over my shoulder. When Amici and I leave, Tanner goes crazy, begging me to save him. I don't feel any remorse. Max, please, is the last thing I hear as Amici and I leave this dank basement. On the way home, Amiki tries to be friendly. Hey, no hard feelings, buddy. Business is business, he says with a fake grin. I don't say anything back. After a moment, he continues. I think we can get even. You broke my leg. I messed up your face a little. There's the fake grin again. I'm silent the whole way. Amiki has refused to make small talk. On the one hand, I am greatly relieved that I will not suffer Tanner's fate. On the other hand, I never liked Amici, and he took great pleasure in beating me up. Getting out of the car, Amiki leans back in his seat and says to me through the open passenger door, "Remember what Mr. Winegrass said," he tells me. Not a word about this. I stare at Amici and give him a short nod. Looking at him, I thought, I don't know where or when, but I will have my revenge. Many months later, the sun pleased me as I gazed at the blue water of my pool. Part of my negotiations with Greg Boston, my builder friend who developed the site, was my own residence. I took a half-acre with a south-facing backyard on the most elevated lot. He designed a beautiful mid-century modern single-level home with a resort-like backyard and a lovely pool. The divorce was difficult. My attorney did a good job of making sure I didn't have to share the proceeds of Aunt Helen's estate with Anna, and she, of course, tried to get a piece of it. I ended up having to write her a check, but it was a lot less than she asked for. From what I hear, she's still bitter about it. My thoughts, as they often do, returned to our relationship. For some reason, I was reflecting on the night Tanner, and I had sat and discussed our individual dreams. As it turned out, neither of us got what we wanted. Tanner wanted to be rich, Anna wanted to be famous, and I just wanted a quiet life with my business and wife. Tanner wasn't rich, and it was unlikely he was even alive. Anna, at least for the moment, was not famous. The opportunity to work with KPL was gone. One thing I remember from our reflections was that I said I would never be rich. I was wrong about that, too. After selling real estate, I quickly became a multimillionaire. And, of course, I didn't have the peaceful existence with my wife that I so desired at that point in my life. It bothered me at times, but I'd already come to terms with my bachelorhood. At that moment, I looked up and saw my new topless girlfriend emerge from the far end of the pool. Water was running down her pointy nipples. I smiled. Max, young Brittany asked, "Can you put some sunblock on me?" "Yes," I smiled. "I'm making a pretty good bachelor." Epilogue. The ballroom was bustling with activity, everyone dressed in elaborate evening gowns. My companion Kai was stunning in a black miniskirt. There were dozens of round tables all around the hall. The annual Children's Charity Ball was one of the major social events of the year. At the far end of the hall, I saw Sydney Winegrass with an attractive woman who was at least 10 years younger than him. I decided to walk over to his table and shake his hand. He didn't recognize me at first. The last time he saw me, I was a bloody mess. Upon recognizing me, he was gracious in his refined manners. I had just established my alibi. I walked away quickly. As I turned and walked back to my table and Kai in a miniskirt, a shiver ran down my spine. I needed to wash my hands. That same night in another part of town, Michael Amich left a bar downtown, probably having had an extra drink while driving. He entered the garage and started looking for his keys. He noticed that this corner of the garage was darker than usual. He also noticed a short, swarthy man, his face obscured by the darkness, leaning against the front fender of his Chrysler. "Chief, move over," he said to the man. With those words, the man stood up and stared at Amich. Just then, two more men appeared out of the shadows. The first blow was like the strike of a whip as the smaller man struck a lightning-fast blow. Then another and another. Amich didn't stand a chance. As the first man continued to kick the lifeless Amich, one of his companions whispered softly, "Angel Vamanos, we have to go." The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and